More than 15 months of conflict that began with Hezbollah's brutal massacre on October the 7th. More than 15 months of terror for the hostages, their families, the Israeli people. More than 15 months of suffering by the innocent people of Gaza. Fighting in Gaza will stop, and soon the hostages will return home to their families. There was no other way for this war to end than with a hostage deal. And I'm deeply satisfied this day has finally come, for the sake of the people of Israel and the families waiting in agony, and for the sake of the innocent people in Gaza who suffered unimaginable devastation because of the war. The Palestinian people have gone through hell. Too many innocent people have died. Too many communities have been destroyed. In this deal, the people of Gaza can finally recover and rebuild. They can look to a future without Hamas in power.
Okay, so let's turn now to CBC's Chris Reyes, who is in New York. Chris is tracking the official reaction to the ceasefire in the United States, also the UN. Chris, what are you hearing?
You know, for a little while there, Adrian, we were watching a lot of empty podiums, and it seemed that they were all waiting for one another. And very shortly after the Qatari Prime Minister spoke and started taking questions, it seemed that the White House got the signal that President Biden would come out and speak. You already heard a part of what he said there as he was with the Vice President as well as the Secretary of State. But then he also went on to explain that he did bring in the members of Trump's team to be part of the negotiation, something that the Qatari Prime Minister talked about, and that it was the strength of negotiators from both administrations that really helped to move this deal forward. Have a listen to President Biden explain that.
You know, those of you who have followed the negotiations can attest, the road to this deal has not been easy. I've worked in foreign policy for decades. This is one of the toughest negotiations I've ever experienced. And we reached this point because of the pressure that Israel built on Hamas, backed by the United States. This deal was developed and negotiated under my administration, but its terms will be implemented, for the most part, by the next administration. In these past few days, we've been speaking as one team.
And we did hear from the Qatari Prime Minister that Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, was in the room as he made the announcement about this deal. This is something that Trump talked about in a post on social media today, even before we heard from anybody in any one of those podiums, Adrian. President-elect Donald Trump took to social media, as he often does, and he made the announcement that this deal was done. This is what he first wrote a little over 2 hours ago. He said, "We have a deal for the hostages in the Middle East. They will be released shortly. Thank you." He then posted another a lengthier post 15 minutes later talking about this epic ceasefire agreement and how it could have only happened as a result of our historic victory in November, as it signaled to the entire world that my administration would seek peace and negotiate deals to ensure the safety of all Americans. Notably absent in that very lengthy post, Adrian, is any credit to President Biden and his team. Now, President Biden seemed to have zero patience for anybody taking credit on this. He was, in fact, asked that question as he walked away from the podium, and he said, "Is that a joke?" But I think it's also worth noting that in that statement, he made sure that it was very clear that this deal is the plan that he put forward back in May, the three-phase plan that his team worked very hard to get approval here at the United Nations from the Security Council. So in that sense, he made sure that his team got credit for this deal, which he called the hardest negotiation of his life, of his career.
Well, when something goes right, lots of people are quick to claim credit. And it is, to be entirely fair, people who were close to that negotiations were saying that the presence of Steve Witkoff from the Trump envoy at the table, as well as those from the Biden administration working together and speaking as one, was pretty impressive for the negotiators, and certainly indicated how seriously they are taking this. I do want to ask you about the UN Secretary General, but in the interim, I think it's important to remind people that we're talking in celebratory terms about a ceasefire, but that doesn't mean the violence is over. We're checking reports about Palestinians killed in the West Bank. Certainly, there are some suggestions that it's not over in Gaza right now, and we have to try to figure out what is happening there. So people are afraid, but wanting to celebrate, but also nervous. But to your point about the UN, what did Antonio Guterres say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and really, it's United Nations workers who know firsthand just how grave the situation is in Gaza, and we've heard in some of the gravest terms from Secretary General Antonio Guterres what those in Gaza are dealing with on a daily basis. To the point that almost the entire population is in danger of starvation. Those were some of his recent statements. And really, I think the Secretary General came out today not to answer any questions about this deal, but to make sure that the message was clear that at least for the UN's part, their number one priority is to really surge that humanitarian assistance into the region as soon as possible, and to call on all parties to remove obstacles for those humanitarians to get in. Have a listen to what he said.
I call on all relevant parties to uphold their commitments and ensure that this deal is fully implemented. From the outset of the violence, I've called for an immediate ceasefire and the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. Our priority now must be to ease the tremendous suffering caused by this conflict. The United Nations stands ready to support the implementation of this deal and scale up the delivery of sustained humanitarian relief to the countless Palestinians who continue to suffer.
And Adrian, you guys have talked a lot about the fact that details around the reporting mechanism of this deal is still up in the air, that those are details that we're not aware of as of yet. But I can tell you that, often a lot of the briefings that happen here at the UN, whether it's at the Security Council or at the General Assembly, is firsthand reports from the UN staff who have been able to get into Gaza and deliver whatever humanitarian aid they can throughout this war, and this war has taken the lives of so many UN staff, and often they are bringing in firsthand reports from the area, and so as soon as this deal is activated, we'll hear right here from the UN how quickly they're going to be able to bring in that aid into the region.
Okay. All right. Chris Reyes reporting for us from New York. Chris, thank you.